The pressure of the workers upon the army is increasing, countering the pressure from the side of the authorities. The Petrograd garrison comes into the focus of events. The expectant period, which has lasted almost 3 days, during which it was possible for the main mass of the garrison to keep up friendly neutrality towards the insurrection, has come to an end. Shoot the enemy, the monarchy commands. Don't shoot your brothers and sisters, cry the workers. And not only that, come with us. Thus, in the streets and squares by the bridges and the barrack gates is waged a ceaseless struggle, now dramatic, now unnoticeable, but always a desperate struggle for the heart of the soldiers. And this struggle in this sharp contact between working men and women and the soldiers under the steady crackling of the rifles and machine guns, the fate of the movement of the war of the country is being decided. The shooting of demonstrators increased the uncertainty among the leaders. The very scale of the movement began to seem dangerous. Even at the meeting of the Vubory Committee, the evening of the 26th, that is 12 hours before the victory, arose discussions as to whether it was not time to end the strike. This may seem astonishing, but remember, it is far easier to recognize victory the day after than the day before. Besides, moods change frequently under the impact of events and the news of them. Discouragement quickly gives way to a flow of enthusiasm. Kayurovs and Shigurins have plenty of personnel courage, but at moments a feeling of responsibility for the masses clutches them. Among the rank-file workers, there were fewer oscillations. Reports about their moods were made to the authorities by a well-informed agent in the Bolshevik organization, Shurkanov. Since the army units have not opposed the crowd, wrote this provocateur, and in individual cases have even taken measures paralyzing the initiative of the police officers. The masses have got a sense of impunity, and now, after 2 days of unobstructed walking the streets, when the revolutionary circles have advanced the slogans, "Down with war" and "Down with the autocracy," the people have become convinced that the revolution has begun, that success is with the masses, and the authorities are powerless to suppress the movement because the troops are with it, that a decisive victory is near, since the troops will soon openly join the side of the revolutionary forces, that the movement will not subside, but will ceaselessly grow to a complete victory and a state revolution. A characterization remarkable for compactness and clarity. The report is a most valuable historic document. This did not, of course, prevent the victorious workers from executing its author. These provocateurs, whose number has enormous, especially in Petrograd, feared more than anyone else did the victory of the revolution. They followed a policy of their own. In the Bolshevik conferences, Shurkanov defended the most extreme actions. In these reports to the secret police has suggested the necessity of a decisive resort of firearms. It is possible that with this aim, Shurkanov tried even to exaggerate the aggressive confidence of the workers, but in the main he was right. but in the main he was right. Events will soon confirm his judgment. The leaders in both camps guessed and vacillated, for not one of them could estimate a priori the relations of forces. The external indications ceased absolutely to serve as a measure. Indeed, one of the chief features of a revolutionary crisis consists in these sharp contradictions between the present consciousness and the old forms of social relationship. A new relation of forces was mysteriously implanting itself in the consciousness of the workers and soldiers. It was precisely the government office called forth by the previous offensive of the revolutionary masses, which transformed a new relation of forces from a potential to an active state. The workers looked thirstily and commandingly into the eyes of the soldier, and the soldier anxiously and diffidently looked away. This meant that, in a way, the soldier could no longer answer for itself. The worker approached the soldier more boldly. The soldier sullenly, but without hostility, guiltily, rather refused to answer. Or sometimes, now more and more often, he answered with pretended severity, in order to conceal how anxiously his heart was beating in his breast. Thus the change was accomplished. The soldier was clearly shaking off his soldiery. In doing so, he could not immediately recognize it himself. The authorities said that the revolution intoxicated the soldier. To the soldier, it seemed, on the contrary, that he was sobering up from the opium of the barracks. Thus the decisive day was prepared the 27th of February. However, on the eve of that day, an incident occurred which, in spite of its episodic nature, paints with a new color all the events of the 26th. Towards evening, the 4th Company of the Pavlovsky Regiment of the Imperial Guard mutinied. In the written report of a police inspector, the cause of the mutiny is categorically stated: indignation against the training squad of the same regiment which, while on duty in the Nevsky, fired on the crowd. Who informed the 4th Company of this? A record has been accidentally preserved. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a handful of workers ran up to the barracks of the Pavlovsky Regiment. Interrupting each other, they told about a shooting of the Nevsky. Tell your comrades that the Pavlovsky too are shooting at us. We saw soldiers in your uniforms on the Nevsky. That was a burning reproach, a flaming appeal. All looked distressed and pale. The seed fell not upon the rock. By 6 o'clock, the 4th Company had left the barracks without permission under the command of a non-commissioned officer. Who was he? His name is drowned forever among hundreds and thousands of equally heroic names, and marched to the Nevsky to recall its training squad. This was not a mere soldiers' multitude over wormy meat. It was an act of high revolutionary initiative. Of their way down, the company had an encounter with a detachment of mounted police. The soldiers opened fire. 1 policeman and 1 horse were killed. another policeman, and another horse were wounded. The further path of the mutineers in the hurricane of the street is unknown. The company returned to the barracks and aroused the entire regiment, but their arms had been hidden. According to some sources, they nevertheless got hold of 30 rifles. They were soon surrounded by the Preobrazhensky. 19 Pavlovsky were arrested and imprisoned in the fortress. The rest surrounded it. According to other information, the officers on that evening found 21 soldiers with rifles missing, a dangerous leak. These 21 soldiers would be seeking allies and defenders all night long. Only the victory of the revolution could save them. The workers will surely learn from them what had happened. This was not a bad omen for tomorrow's battles. Nabokov, one of the most prominent liberal leaders, whose truthful memoirs seem at times to be the very diary of his party and of his class, was returning home from visit at 1 o'clock in the morning along the dark and watchful streets. He was perturbed and filled with dark forebodings. It is possible that one of the crossings he met a fugitive Pavlovets. Both hurried past. They had nothing to say to each other. In the workers' quarters and the barracks, some kept watch or conferred, others slept the half-sleep on the bivouac, or dreamed feverishly about tomorrow. Here the fugitive Pavlovets found shelter. How scant are the records of the mass fighting in the February days scant, even in comparison with the slim records of the October fights. In October, the party directed the insurrection from day to day in its articles, proclamations, and reports. At least the external continuity of the struggle is recorded. Not so in February. The masses had almost no leadership from above. The newspapers were silenced by the strike. Without a look back, the masses made their own history. To reconstruct a living picture of the things that happened in the street is almost unthinkable. It would be well if we could recreate at least the general continuity and inner order of events. The government, which has not yet lost hold of the machinery of power, observed the events of the whole even less ably than the left parties, which, as we know, were far from brilliant in this direction. After the successful shootings of the 26th, the minister took heart for an instant. At dawn of the 27th, Protopopov reassuringly reported that, according to information received, part of the workers intend to return to work, but the workers never thought of going back to the shops. Yesterday's shootings are failures, and failures had not discouraged the masses. How explain this? Apparently, the losses were outbalanced by certain gains, pouring through the streets, colliding with the enemy, pulling at the arms of soldiers, crawling under horses' bellies, attacking, scattering, leaving their corpses on the crossings, grabbing a few firearms, spreading the news, catching at rumors. The insurrectionary mass becomes a collective entity with numberless eyes, ears, and antennae. At night, returning home from the arena of struggle to the workers' quarter, it goes over the impressions of the day and shifting away what is pretty and accidental. Casts his own thoughtful balance. On the night of 27th, this balance was practically identical with the report made to the authorities by the provocateur Shurkanov. In the morning, the workers streamed again to the factories and, in open meetings, resolved to continue the struggle. Especially resolute, as always, were the Vubortsi, but in other districts to these morning meetings were enthusiastic to continue the struggle, but what will that mean today? The general strike had issued in revolutionary demonstrations by immersed crowds, and the demonstrations had led to a coalition with the troops. To continue the struggle today will mean that to summon an armed insurrection, but nobody had formulated these summons. It had grown irresistibly out of the events, but it was never placed on the order of the day by the Revolutionary Party. The art of revolutionary leadership in its most critical movements consists night-tenths in knowing how to sense the mood of the masses, just as Kayurov detected the movement of the Cossacks' eyebrow, thought on a large scale, and unexcelled ability to detect the mood of the masses was Lenin's great power. But Lenin was not in Petrograd. The legal and semi-legal socialistic staffs, Kerensky, Shaise, Skobelev, and all those who circled around them, pronounced warnings and opposed the movement. But even the Central Bolshevik staff, composed of Shliapnikov, Salutsky, and Molotov, was amazing in its helplessness and lack of initiative. In fact, the districts and barracks were left to themselves. The first proclamation to the army was released only on the 26th by one of the social democratic organizations close to the Bolsheviks. This proclamation, rather hesitant in character, not even containing an appeal to come over to the people, was distributed throughout all the city districts on the morning of the 27th. However, testifies Yurinev, the leader of this organization, the tempo of the revolutionary events was such that our slogans were already lagging behind it. By the time the leaflets had penetrated into the thick of the troops, the latter had already come over, as the Bolshevik center, Shliapnikov, at the demand of Shugurin, one of the best worker leaders of the February days, finally wrote an appeal to the soldiers on the morning of the 27th. Was it even published? At best, it might have come in at the finish. It could not possibly have influenced the events of February 27. We must lay it down as a general rule for those days, that higher the leaders, the further they lagged behind. But the insurrection, not yet so named by anyone, took its own place on the order of the day. All the thoughts of the workers were concentrated on the army. Don't you think we can get them started? Today, Hapsarat agitation will no longer do. The Vubor section staged a meeting near the barracks on the Moscow regiment. The enterprise proved a failure. It is difficult for some officer or sergeant major to work the handle of a machine gun. The workers were scattered by a cruel fire. A similar attempt was made at the barracks of reserve regiment, and there too officers with machine gun interfered between the workers and soldiers. The leaders of the workers fumed, looked for firearms, demanded them from the party, and the answer was, the soldiers have the firearms, to get them. The soldiers have the firearms, go get them. That they knew themselves, but how to get them? Isn't everything going to collapse all at once today? This came on the critical point of the struggle. Either the machine gun will wipe out the insurrection, or the insurrection will capture the machine gun.